Thank you. It was very nice here in the beginning to hear a voice from Quebec. It brought back memories from my youth. And it brought back memories from my youth about my first love, which I met in a bar in Budapest, in Hungary at the time when Hungary still was a communist country. Or like the Hungarians would have said, socialist. Now my first love was from Saskatoon, but was studying painting and art history at Concordia University in Montreal. So I moved to Montreal. And to make a living there, I got a job as a bike messenger for a French company. But I don't speak French. But the dispatcher spoke excellent English with a pronounced North American accent. Now, in Montreal, a lot of the streets have both a name in English and in French. And sometimes those names are completely different, reflecting the different kind of importance the English community and the French-speaking community have felt about who should give names to streets. Now, in order to help me orientate in Montreal, the dispatcher would give me the English names. However, when he gave me Dorchester, I couldn't find it, because there were no longer any signs saying Dorchester, just René Lévesque. So it was a bit confusing, but just the first time. When I'd finished my career as a bike messenger through a car collision, I started teaching English to Quebecois who wanted to improve their careers by being bilingual. And then I got a job as a dishwasher in a sort of mafia-like restaurant. One of these restaurants with an escalator. And then I went back to Europe. There's a saying that goes, to have a good eye, and if one has a good eye, one might become a painter, or a photographer, or an art historian, or a critic, or some other kind of observer, like a spy. Thus, it might not come as a big surprise that art historians is the most prominent group of people getting recruited as spies. Artists are not, even if there are artists with good eyes, since artists are notoriously bad at holding secrets. Since art, after all, is about blurting things out. Anthony Blunt was a British art historian and a spy for the Soviet Union. As an art historian, Blunt was prominent. He was the manager of the Queen's picture collection for 27 years. But first and foremost, he wrote a substantial number of books on everything from the Italian Renaissance to Picasso's Guernica. Always with a deep understanding of how art connected with the time and place in which it was made. And always beautifully, lucidly written. Of Blunt's spying activities, which took place between sometime in the 30s and the 50s, less is clear. His spying was reported to the MI5 by one of his recruits, the American Michael Straight, in 1963. Blunt confessed the following year. But Blunt's secret activities, his spying, were kept secret. In the great British tradition, of avoiding public embarrassment. And his spying was not revealed until 1979, 16 years later. So it was a teenage secret. And it was revealed by Margaret Thatcher, then the newly elected British Prime Minister. I really need some water. Then newly elected Prime Minister, who wanted to mark that it was she, the politician, that decided things, not the civil service. The Baltic Notebooks of Anthony Blunt was conceived under a premise that if Sir Anthony Blunt, which after Margaret Thatcher's revelation was stripped of the Sir, that if Sir Anthony, the former Sir Anthony Blunt was alive, that if Blunt still was alive, he would, for better or worse, most likely be the first person to keep an eye on things. The scene can always use a good observer. And an art historian like Blunt is a great observer. Besides, the most interesting art seems to have already embraced the uncertainty of its outcome. Aiken, I'm Scandinavian. You might think that I'm from Britain. I'm doing my best, but Aiken, thank you. Aiken. I think we've got a sort of phonetic iron curtain going through the Atlantic here. You sound most convincing, sir. Akin. The Baltic Notebooks of Anthony Blunt has the ambition to serve every purpose of a notebook. As a phone book, as a journal, as a sketchbook, to loose pages, or to fill up with handouts, to grow into a full-length novel, to be all these things at once, or to be forgotten for a whole year without much ado. And instead of continuing to try to speak about our ambitions, which sometimes fail, I would like to read a text from the notebooks of Sir Anthony Blunt, written by my great friend, What did he say? It was a pronounced North American accent. My great friend, the wonderful art historian, thinker and writer, Valentinas Klimashanskas. And it's a text that was written a year ago based on real events. One Saturday in Riga, late September. The barman says, "Sorry, we don't serve neutrinos here." A neutrino enters a bar. This is one but one of many tweets inspired by the news that neutrinos, ghostly subatomic particles, might travel faster than light. If so, science fiction could become science fact, with wonderful paradoxes, such as effects preceding their causes. One example would be a punchline preceding a story. Cartesius replies, "I think not," and vanishes. A soundtrack walks into a text. The sound of the Riga horn quartet comes from a wonky ship named Mississippi, but the musicians refuse to imagine time as a river. When they don't play music, they play cards. One of them has a shiner, but it's not clear if it's a dirty card player or a dirty horn player. Schrödinger's cat walks into a bar and doesn't. If the result of the experiment proved to be correct, and effects precede their causes, and a punchline precedes the setup, what happens to logic? And what happens to grammar? Grammar? How are we going to define before and after, or after and before? A dog called Naomi catwalks out of a picture into a museum and is taken out for a walk into a film by Antanas Gerlicus. So presumably we don't need before and after, since many different actions may happen in a single moment. A dyslexic man walks into a piece of underwear, more specifically a bra. A white cube is transformed into a sugar cube, known for its ability to memorialize astral information and yet stay white. It comfortably sits on a bar table, half flirting with a bottle of absinthe on the shelf by the mirrored wall. Sugar records reveal that an iridescent paint-fed rose functions as an RGB color palette, not KGB, and as a popular object for starting conversations. An unrecognized voice with a parrot's accent says, "The rose is a MacGuffin, is a red herring." "Sometimes sugar is just a cigar," says Fred. "Right," said Freud. A parrot walks into a bar. It comes from a work of Marcel Brothers, who famously withdrew from poetry and developed a fascination for birds. Like in his piece, Don't Say I Didn't Say It, Parrot, from 1974. This installation consists of 2 palm trees, an African grey parrot, a glass case displaying glass case. I always felt that there was a connection between Brothers and John Cage. They're so cool. No, this was actually just something I came to think of. A glass case displaying Brothers' catalogue and a recording of the artist reading his poem, Me I Say, I. A magician walks down an alley and turns into a bar. The standard length of a miracle is around 15 seconds, says the Swedish magician Malin Nilsson. She hosts the opening night evening of the new project by the Stockholm-based artist duo Goldin plus Celebi. Standard length of a miracle. While performing a whole set of tricks on her audience, she deconstructs the notion of magic. For me, magic means using logical thinking to find little gaps in human perception and exploit them. An amnesiac comes into a bar and asks, "Do I come here often?" In 15 seconds, Malin Nilsson puzzles the notion of cause and effect in the mind of her audience. Everyone waits until the end, applauds, and then they leave the theatre set to re-enter a safer world of cause and effect. A performance is about to start. Instruction number 12, an astral performance act of imaginary characters versus real artworks. This time is exceptionally presented to the population of the physical plan, with an introduction by the artist, by Chiara Fumai. And the barman asks, what is the title of that piece again? Two characters, a man and a woman, take seats at the performer's table, the only unoccupied seats they can find in this otherwise packed bar. One of them clearly mistakes the astral-themed performance for a spiritual seance session, holding a bottle of brandy between his knees. The other one steals the bottle and then the show by transforming herself into a series of illustrations of astral and imaginary characters. A book walks into a bar. The barman says, "Please, no stories." Olaf Olsson walks out from a cup of coffee. He's about to host Red Alert, a talk show on the brink of disaster. The sugar cube is switched on. Olsson encourages the audience to leave, if they feel like it, at any given moment. And some do, not getting the joke. The brink is sliding towards disaster like the raft of the Medusa. However, the audience bravely jumps onto the rocking raft while transforming the Medusa into a series of photos, looking like they were taken in a comedy club using a secret camera. The barman asks, "Why the big pause?" Two men enter a bar, looking like counter-revolutionaries spying in Odessa after the October Revolution. The barman says, "Aren't you the Mormons I threw out 5 minutes ago?" They answer while they open a Samsonite fully packed with books. "No, we're the opposite to Mormonism. We distribute the accidental relationship between a book and a reader by asking the reader to choose a book and a paragraph, as in a lottery. A parrot picks the lucky number in the lottery. The number appears to be a sentence, later lost among all the other records of the sugar cube. An Egyptian curator enters a bar and says in Lithuanian, "A parrot is a bird whose body is inhabited by others. It mimics their language and creates comical and uncanny resemblances." The sculptor Carl Larsson published Parrot in 2010, a book of poetry. In it, he demonstrates the technique of parroting, of using a foreign language, a language of the other, to create something he himself can't completely comprehend. But how does a parrot choose which words to remember and which to forget? And to which end does it, the parrot, imagine its choice to be? Cartesius walks into a bar. The barman says, "Me I say, me I say I." The story of a rabbit pulled out from a magician's hat started in 18th century Britain with Mary Toft. Mary became the subject of a considerable controversy when she tricked doctors into believing that she had given birth to rabbits. When she finally admitted to the fraud, street entertainers and magicians started to produce rabbits in their acts as a contemporary reference understood by their audience. And what about a parrot or a dog or a sugar cube? Exactly to what language or other trick do they refer to? A parrot enters a bar. It makes the sound of a closing book. It makes the sound of a closing book. It makes the sound of a closing book again and again until the sound becomes a book of crumples, and the crumples becomes a nun book. And the nun book becomes the sound, not attached to any page, the sound of a poem by Jurgis Paskevicius. In this dream about the presence, when I'm reading you from down to top and trying to understand myself, let's not concentrate on this dot. The economist Christian Marazzi says, as language is considered not only to be the instrument to describe facts, but also to create them, in a world which institutions like money, property, technologies, and work all are linguistic institutions that become instruments of production of those same real facts. Now, if facts are created by speaking them, as Marazzi is claiming, isn't it language itself, full of gaps in human perception, that is exploited and transformed into a set of magic acts? An amnesiac comes into a bar and asks, "Do I come here often?" A blushing carpet, a bronze cast of hands whose shadow cast a portrait of a person holding the Spectator paper, and a text by a Lacanian philosopher on a subject which remains unknown to the readers, enter a bar. All three of them are blind and belong to an installation by Carl Larsson. They're unaware of their surroundings, so to derive humor from the situation would be exploitative. In any case, the bartender turns to them, takes a look and says, "What is this? Some kind of joke?" And the blushing carpet answers, "No, we came from at least 2 different shows, while participating in both of them at the same time." The text by a Lacanian philosopher on a subject which remains unknown to its readers is, of course, also blind. It cannot read, so it says, is the question real, imaginary, or symbolic? The neutrino says, "No, I was just passing through." Thank you.